here today as a keynote speaker. I believe I have a few disclaimers to be made. First, I think this is the first time that I have a TED talk, as I was told, a type of speech to be made. So I have no support. I have only one slide. I was told that I have to be short. I have only 15 minutes, but I don't have any watch to watch. So I don't know when this will be, finishing. And finally, I thought that I had to be inspiring. And then the topic that it was chosen for me to be inspiring was financial instruments. So I hope you will bear with me for the next 10-15 minutes. But if we can have maybe the first slide and the only slide, I thought I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a story. And the story is of a mythological being. Which is called the final beneficiary. The final beneficiary is someone that is willing to access financial instruments, and he needs or she needs these financial instruments to be well designed and well connected. And I will go through the story showing that this is not obvious, and that to achieve the results of having a good financial instrument is something very important for the final beneficiary, but is also important for all of us. If you allow me, I will not call it final beneficiary anymore, and I think probably one of the things we should be doing in order to improve the impact of what we're doing is to use words that are probably more accessible to anyone, and so I would call it the entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur, although the French would like to claim that is coming from the French word entreprendre, I have to disappoint our cousins because this is actually a word coming from Latin, and the Latin word is actually a combination of two words. It's intraprehendere, and if you want to make an easy translation in English of that, it would mean more or less to make a choice between different things. And the entrepreneur is a girl or a guy or an entrepreneurial team that normally makes the choice to change the world. If you ask any entrepreneur after 2 or 3 questions why you're doing this, is because they want to have somehow a better world. And it doesn't matter what it is their final objective. There are entrepreneurs that want to create jewelry out of waste materials. There are entrepreneurs that want to give the possibility to each and every one of us to set up our own radio and become DJs. There are entrepreneurs that want to heal pediatric cancer. Any of these objectives are the normal objectives that an entrepreneur will have in order to have a better world. And I believe that we shouldn't forget that this is not something that it is nice to have. That startups and scale-ups and good companies. It's only something that we should have in our regional or national policies to tick our boxes, because they are actually something we need to have. And there are a few statistics. I will only mention a couple of them. One is a study from Nesta, a very well-respected UK foundation that is constantly monitoring what it is called the vital 6%. And 6% of the high-growth, ambitious entrepreneurs are the ones generating around 50 to 60% of all the new jobs. And there is another study from the Kaufman Foundation, again a very well-respected foundation in the US, called the high-growth companies and the American economy, that shows quite clearly like 1% of the knowledge-intensive companies are actually generating about, over 5 years, about 10% of new jobs directly and about 40% of total jobs indirectly. So this is not something nice. This is not that, it's nice to have these entrepreneurs around, but it's something that we need if you want to have new jobs and if you want to continue being innovative and if we want to grow our economies. So what is the connection, that's my word, between these entrepreneurs and what we are doing, and what are the different element of this journey in order to provide them with the best possible tool to succeed and achieve their dreams and therefore improve our lives. Well, the first level is a level of connection between the public sector and the private sector. We know that there's been for many years a culture of grants on one side provided by the public sector, and private equity on the other side provided by the different private investors. Well, I believe that financial instruments are succeeding more and more, and I've been seeing them for the last 20 years. They are succeeding more and more in creating a connection between the private sector and the public sector. It is a matter of understanding more, it is a matter of learning, it is a matter of managing risks. I have the pleasure to speak to a number of managing authorities and national promotional banks and so on and so forth. And when you present an equity financial instruments and you say, okay, this is about 40 million or 50 million euro, it will invest in about 20 to 30 companies. About 60 or 70% of these companies will fail. A few will even go bankrupt. A few will just do fine, and only 2 or 3 will become the stars that will generate the growth that we need. Well, when you have this kind of speech with the managing authorities, they are frightened, because they immediately think that this is, them giving 40 million of public money into the majority of companies that will fail. So unless you understand that this is a process, that this is something that you have to do in a persistent way, that you have to understand what is the overall logic, and that actually the 2 or 3 that will succeed will create 60% of the jobs, and you can actually explain this and convince your politicians, and you can stay with that for 10, 15, 20 years, then this is not an easy journey to make, but it is a necessary journey to make, and people have to learn how to. It's about managing risk, and people have to learn that this is the name of the game. But even when you go to the private sector will also say, I don't want to be involved with these kind of financial instruments. The rules are too complicated, and if I'm in, then I'm not sure how am I going to get out. And there is all sorts of different reasons why they wouldn't like to go into that. But at the same time, it is a need, it is a must that this marriage between public and private happens, because when you have a journey of taking something from zero to success, of course the level of risk will change, and so first the public sector will be more relevant, and then gradually the private sector will take over. But then this necessity of making this marriage between public and private and connect public and private sector, it's something very important. Also understanding how to grow a private sector investment. It's something that those that are designing financial instruments must understand. I was, as it was mentioned, I was part of the creation of one of the today largest angel groups in Italy, but when we started we were only 9. Now we're over 210, and we are one of the top 5 early stage investors in our country. But you have to start somewhere. You have to explain also to the private investors, to the business angels, how they can give back, and how by giving back and by matching their resources with public resources, which at the very beginning are very abundant, will make the magic and will make things happen. I believe there is an element of culture there. I believe we need to develop still a lot, especially the culture of giving back, time, expertise, and a little bit of money. But so I think that financial instruments are if you like, the connection point and the ring that will connect public sector and especially grants with private sector investment. I think that there is a second level that you have to also take into account when you are designing a successful financial instruments, which is what I would call critical mass. It is quite obvious that a lot of regions do not have the critical mass to develop their own financial instruments, whether because they are too small, like I'm coming from a region called Umbria in the center of Italy, which is only 800,000 people, and it's very difficult to set up proper financial instruments with that size of a region, or because it's not so well developed, particularly in innovation and high growth type of companies. So again, I think that there has a need to have a very strong, if you like, horizontal connection between regions to create a critical mass around financial instruments, to make them big enough, well managed enough in order to be successful. And finally, I think there is a third element about these financial instruments, that it's more like a vertical connection, if you like.